Hey, what's up? You're watching Vec, and with the release of Project Cars 3 looming up ahead, I bought the game on pre-release with the deluxe order to get that early access, and I was really hoping to sink some hours into that game and start up a new gameplay series for y'all. But I was playing the game, the problems really started to show, and instead of releasing that gameplay video, I decided to make this video instead, detailing more of what I experienced and really just the problems with this game. And honestly, there are a lot of problems, more than I can cover in this video. Having myself watch a lot of early reviews for this game, I thought, okay, they can't be that big of a deal. There are problems in every single game, but there's always some sort of saving grace, or the game is just fun to play, which is what I always look for. Is the game fun to play? I really don't even care about graphics, even if it looks like a mobile game, how many people were saying. That is, for me, besides the point. But even the gameplay just could not save this game for me. And mind you, I love Project Cars. I love Project Cars 2. And this game was not supposed to be that. They were calling it a spiritual successor to Shift, or Shift 2 Unleashed. But even those games didn't even have the issues that I faced with Project Cars 3. And honestly, after playing the game for a little while, I had to just turn it off and really think about what just happened, what it was that I just experienced. And honestly, like that was last night. I was just gonna make a video, edit it, put it out, start that new series, but I was just sitting there just thinking, this is not good. This is just not good. So if you're willing to hear me out, I'm gonna go through a few points I had written out. I wrote out a few pages of just my thoughts to really collect them. So with that, let's get started. So first of all, I wanted to play this game with my G920, and that's really how I wanted to play the game. I know a lot of people are saying it's better with the controller, and I did try it with the controller, and I will get to that. But right off the bat, the steering on the wheel was just awful. There was virtually no force feedback. It felt like a broken arcade machine. In the vast majority of cases, the force feedback really kicks in when the race starts, so you always get that loose feeling, and then when the race starts, it kicks in. But it wasn't even the case. It felt loose before the race started and after. So a funky and loose, broken wheel feeling didn't really help in controlling the car, because I had no sense of feedback. Now, I went to the settings for force feedback and I was set to 50, which was a bit confusing because I wasn't actually feeling any force feedback. So I set that to about 75, 76, I can't really remember which one, which actually did help quite a bit. But there was really no difference in force feedback between that Corvette that you drive at the beginning of the game and your starter car. And I chose the Evo 6, which has all-wheel handling. So a difference in force feedback between cars, it's not there. It's very much like Grid, where all the cars feel the same, but not even in a good way. And it just feels really just dull, muted, and I really don't know how to really say this without saying it was just bad. It was really bad. You get no difference in feel between cars. All the cars are literally the same car. I wouldn't really be able to tell you the difference between that Corvette and that Evo, except that when I started, the wheel was just completely dead and the Corvette felt super loose, and the Evo just felt like I had just adjusted the force feedback. It really didn't feel like the Evo. And then there was the acceleration issues. Acceleration was really all over the place. Flat out, the car felt super unresponsive, and it would even hang around 4,500 RPM. Like literally it would hit 45 RPM and just stay there. I could not accelerate. It felt a lot like in Forza Horizon 4 ranked matches where you hit a wall really fast and you get a penalty, so you can't really accelerate that fast. But even then you can accelerate. In this case, it wouldn't go. At first I thought it was something like turbo lag, but I don't think that was the case. I think there was just an issue between the game and receiving input from the pedal. And then there were the issues with the gas pedal. Turning gas around the corner, even at slow speeds, would spin out the car. I think there's a couple cases where I was going about 45 miles per hour on a soft turn, and then the car would just spin out. And I don't really know why. The brake was just super unresponsive. Like I would just have to really jam my foot on the brake pedal, and the G920 has a notoriously hard brake pedal. I don't have a mod on it, so that hard brake pedal is still there. And unless I really did that, I really couldn't brake, and just doing that forced the car to brake really hard and suddenly, which I didn't want. I really had no control over my brake pedal. And then after adjusting the brake pedal, it had a dead zone of 5, which is really not that much. I'd set that dead zone to 0, but then I had cases where the car would just brake really hard and suddenly, even if I was feathering the brake just to try to kind of maintain some momentum in a corner and really just be light with it, and it would just brake really hard and suddenly and spin out. Again, I just lost complete control, even though I was just mostly going just on a soft corner. I had absolutely no control of what was going to happen next. I had really just no control whatsoever. With acceleration and braking issues, the car really just felt like it was just lagging constantly. And it made keeping pace with the AI really difficult. I've seen the reviews, and one of the biggest gripes is that the AI is super easy even on the hardest difficulty. But with the issues on braking acceleration, I really just cannot compete. It really felt like instead of making the AI more competitive, the game intentionally hinders the driver in order to make the AI more competitive, which is seriously not the way to go. And going back to the braking, the animation on the braking, the car, to call it cartoonish was an understatement. The animation and the feel of the braking felt more like a child's racing game. A car would just kind of do this, especially on a straight line, but if you were to brake, instead of the car going forward like this and just shifting the weight, it would do this, and it would just kind of go like that. It was literally like a cartoon or just an early PS1 racing game rather than a game that would come out in 2020. The only way I could really describe it was brake lock, but it wasn't really locking the brakes. It actually felt, or it even looked like, the brakes were failing to really just press down and clamp down on the discs, and one side or the other was receiving brake lock and would just kind of do that weird cartoonish brake. And that happened no matter what kind of braking you were doing. Even if you're braking super hard or super soft, it would still do the same animation, which was just really jarring. And this was when the game was actually registering my braking. As I mentioned before, I was using the G920, which does have that issue with the brake pedal. The game allows you to have settings for specific wheels, and a G920 is one of those options for settings. So you would think that a game with an option for a G920 would keep in mind just the shortcomings of a pedal like that, and especially the braking pedal, but it didn't. It just felt like it was just a setting, and that's it. I had to constantly after each and every race tweak something, and really nothing truly helped, just made it just slightly okay. I had to eventually turn on ABS, which I didn't want to, because having ABS with the G920 pedal just breaks ABS, and you really can't brake that well with ABS on that pedal. It helped, but it didn't solve that cartoonish feel or look of braking. And honestly, I think it was a design choice rather than really the car locking. It didn't make braking a less of a hindrance, but it was still really wildly unpredictable. I love the Evo 6, and I have these two toy Evos. Literally from my childhood is how much I love this car. And I've loved it in every single iteration, whether it be in a driving sim or an arcade game. From Grid and NFS to PC2, ACC, and Motorsport 7 and Horizon 4. The car has always been a really decent car, and I just love this car. But for the very first time, I honestly felt like the car didn't love me back. I know it sounds kind of sappy in a weird way to say, but the car was fighting me. Felt like a Bronco that was trying to buck me off at every moment. But instead of a wild, healthy, strong Bronco, it had 4 broken legs. And yeah, I swapped to the controller in case the game was truly meant for a controller. It made it feel better. That's one way of putting it, but all those past elements that I was dealing with the wheel were still very much present. The car did respond better, but still felt clunky. The acceleration still had some of the same issues. I could control acceleration a little bit better, but still very much the same issues. And the braking was much more better and much more responsive, but still felt like it would completely lock up doing that weird cartoonish braking. And that was still with ABS on. On a controller with ABS on, your brakes felt like they were locking. And only one! Seriously, only one brake. I play all these games with minimal assist, and I really love the authentic setting for PC2, because that meant that the game would set your assist settings depending on the car that you were driving and how they were in their real life counterparts. But there are no such settings in PC3, at least none that I could see anywhere. Assists were either on or off. That's it. The game asks what level assist you want at the beginning, but they don't really tell you what it's going to be on or off, what settings are going to be there for you or not. So really the only option is to go into custom and turn them on or off yourself. If you could really honestly even say that they're on or off. The settings only work to take off the edge off the problems, but they don't solve them or really help you in any way. And taking the edge off poor handling and response is really just, I mean, there's still poor handling and response. Now, if that wasn't really bad enough, the progression system was questionable. It felt like they ripped a progression system from Forza and Tony Hawk Pro Skater, but somehow with some mobile pay-to-win elements without actually charging you real cash. You either unlock new races and progress by completing these checklists. So each race had 3 challenges for you to complete, like a checklist, much like a level in Tony Hawk where you have these checklists that you had to complete before proceeding or progressing. And you had to complete a certain number of those to go to the next set of races, just like in Tony Hawk where you had to complete a certain number before going to the next level or the next map. But then you also had the option of paying credits to progress, which is in itself kind of confusing. You could either just pay your way through everything or have to complete a checklist to progress. You could honestly just keep winning and winning and winning, and if you didn't complete the checklist, you would not progress. And ultimately, you would just have to pay your way through the progression system. I do love the idea of having a checklist of challenges for each race that gives XP or credits, but them being the determinant factor in progression is not fun gameplay. It's unnecessary gating that makes it feel like a mobile game, like one of those, oh, if you get 4 green gems in a row, you get these bonus XP that will help you get to the next level. But instead of progressing naturally and earning XP to go on to the next level, you had to get those 4 green gems in a row. And I understand the XP and leveling is a good way to unlock new cars, new systems, new upgrades, new races, but the XP seemed to be tied to that checklist, and it was really the only way to earn experience. I felt like the game was developed first as a mobile cash grab, with the option to buy credits with real cash, with a real possibility to fast track progression, especially with the option to pay credits to progress still very much present, or meet certain challenges like, you say, those green gems in a row, was first implemented and then scrapped, kinda? They left the elements in place and then decided to add a more traditional racing progression system later on as almost a last-ditch effort, but it just didn't work. Pretty much because that new progression system was very much tied to the old mobile-style progression system. And lastly, and again, I have to make this very clear, the least determinant factor for me in enjoying a game of any type is the graphic. I still very much go back to play really old games like Dragon Age Origins, which has really kind of not great graphics, but I love that game and I'm still able to go back because graphics for me are not a factor. They weren't awful, but the cars really didn't seem like they were realistic scans or true to life by any means. They look like arcade versions, but even racing games like NFS Heat, NFS 2015, or even the previous PC2 had better looking cars. The tarmac was weird. It looked like more of a soft running surface like that you find on a high school running track, rather than an actual paved road. It kind of looked soft and mushy. The buildings looked like they had a minimal rendering that seemed more in place with an HD graphics mod for, let's say, something like Midnight Club 2. They were undetailed and had a small percentage of depth done to them. I actually got a glimpse of a tree and it looked like it had like wallpaper pasted on them. That's just how bad they looked. I know people that work for art departments in video games. I play with some on a regular basis and others I've met through mutual friends. I've met these people and I've talked to them and I know how hard it can be to work in an arts department. Even though it's not in a development department, it's still very hard work. But it really seemed like Slightly Mad didn't even give them the budget to do the best that they could. It wasn't appropriate to truly bring PC3 to life or even give it some sort of life. Everything just seemed just diminished and dull. Forza Horizon 3, a now 4-year-old game, has some cartoonish graphics, but even that looks much better than PC3, a game released in 2020. I can't truly nail down the purpose of this game or who it's for. It's not for the arcade crowd, because even on the bad end, say something like Grid is still very fun and PC3 is not. And honestly, Grid is a much better game than PC3, at least at this current state of PC3. And it's definitely not for the sim racing crowd, as there are virtually no real sim elements to this game. Sure, you can tune, you can tweak, but even that is really minimal. It's less than you would find in Forza Horizon. I bought the deluxe edition on pre-order because I truly had hopes for this game. Even if it was on the bad end of racing sims where the cars drove like Grid, I knew I could still very much enjoy and sink hours into this game. I've done so with Grid and I knew I could do it with this game if that was very much the case, which some really early access reviewers kind of led me to believe. Or even if it was going to be more like an arcade like NFS, and this was called a spiritual successor to Shift. I mean, I started this channel with doing NFS Heat and more NFS content before pivoting to Forza. I love the NFS series, even the worst of the bunch like Payback or for some Pro Street. But it's not anything like those games, not at all. It's honestly, without a doubt, the worst racing experience in memory. At some point, I just had to stop playing the game because I really couldn't fathom what I was seeing and experiencing. I refunded my copy because despite all my hopes for this game and wanting this to work out in some way, willingly dropping 100 of my own cash on it, I was immediately burned. I can't recommend this game to anyone for any reason, at least not yet, at least not till there are hours put into fixing seemingly underdeveloped and incomplete elements. I was seriously looking forward to a new series or new racing game to share with you all. I'm sorry to anyone that was hopeful and had a glint in their eye at the release of PC3, because that was very much me since that announcement trailer. But Slightly Mad are gonna have to do a lot for this game and support it like no other for this game to really succeed, or even have a chance at fixing the game. Maybe then, maybe sometime in the future, I'll do the content and sink those excited hours into 3. But not now, not today. If you want to play a Project Cars game, play the first 2. Thanks for watching and hearing me out, and as always, take care of yourselves and each other, and have a good one.